Welcome to What Juices You, where we explore what energizes leaders, how that energy fuels performance, connection, and growth. I'm Brady Wilson, the co-founder of Juice Inc. And in each episode, I sit down with leaders and we talk about what fuels them, what juices them, and the lessons they've learned that can be helpful for all of us. Today, I'm really super excited to be interviewing a good friend and someone I've worked with for quite some time. His name is Nadorozny. He is the CAO of the Town of Aurora in Ontario, Canada. Doug, welcome.
Thank you very much, Brady. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah. So I'm going to start today with a question that I have been asking leaders literally for 20 years. And the question is, what juices you? So what's that thing that when you wake up in the morning, you don't have to fuel or energize it, it energizes you. And it's able to sustain your energy through, so in municipal government, there are never-changing aspects that can be draining, and there are ever-changing aspects that can be draining. So how does one fuel your own energy, the energy of your ELT, your managers, and your employees in the midst of all that, caught between the desires and demands of the mayor and the council and all the constituents that have their own sense of, hey, this is how you should be serving me, and then all of the good employees at Town of Aurora. And I thought that it would be really helpful just to give people a bit of context, Doug, in terms of how it is that we started working together, but more importantly, your journey, because you didn't start out in municipal government, you started out in something quite different. And I thought maybe you could just tell a bit of your story of how it is that you got from where you came from to where you are today.
Sure. Yes. Well, it is quite a path and one that I never expected to be on. But yes, I did start in the entrepreneurial world as a small business owner. I basically bought a business from some partners, took a little branch off, two of us and myself, three employees up in Sudbury, Ontario, where I was born and raised. And it was a computer business, technology based. And 9 years later, it had 60 employees in 4 different centers across Northern Ontario. So quite a change over those 9 years. But I thrived in that environment. I loved it. And I would have been doing it for the rest of my life, except that I got courted by a publicly traded company that wanted to buy it for what it would be worth a few years out, which is not something that happens quite often,
Right.
but they were a motivated purchaser. And so I ended up selling the business. I was to stay with them for a few years. That didn't work out. I was much too much an entrepreneur to be in a big publicly traded company. So we amicably parted ways and decided that was best for both of us.
Yeah. Hey,
So
just before you go on, there's a story that I absolutely love about, it has to do with credit cards and that, in that business. And just before you go to where you went next, you got to tell people that story. It's just so delicious.
Thank you. So in that journey, that 9 years in the tech industry was a crazy time. Things were, change was. I used to say there's 3 generations of product in one fiscal year, so it's just impossible. And when you're growing, you're relying on banks and things like to grow. So it was a very, very difficult time from that perspective, but a thrilling time because then you just go.
Yeah.
But there was a stage, and I won't get into the details, where I, for all intents and purposes, had been over trading and doing too much too fast and was pretty much functionally bankrupt. I was told to tell the people that had backed my business that the collateral loans were going to come in. That was my legal advice. So I did that, told those people that their collateral mortgages were about to be called in and I was about to be bankrupt. And then through a series of really good things, I pulled back from that. I came back from the edge, and this was at year 4 or 5, and managed to keep her going and prospered beyond that. But as a result of that journey, I said, okay, I never want to be in this position again. And at that point, I had 2 locations. And again, adding a lot of people to a small business where I was the owner. And so I set out to do mission statement training. I mean, we had a whole exercise around mission statements and if we were going to avoid the situation I was in, it was going to be with a clear sense of purpose about what we were going to be and what things we would have to avoid to make sure that we never ended up in the precarious position we were in.
Yeah.
And so that all spun and resulted in what I call this mission statement training course. And so what would happen is, by the time I actually got the course part of it done, the mission statement training was a direct after the near bankruptcy. And then I think about 2 years later, we had 3 locations, and so now I've got employees in 3 places. So every 6 months, I would bring all the new employees down to the Sudbury head office,
Yeah.
and I would do mission statement training with them for a day. The owner speaking to these new people that were part of my business. And the object of the exercise was to get those employees to make decisions consistent with what I would have made as an owner. I wanted them to feel like they had that kind of freedom. If the decision makes sense, if it's something that you think would jive with the owner of the business, then do that. If there, regardless if it's against policy, if there is no policy, then make one up. But be consistent with the mission of the organization and how I, relay to people I'd like my clients, my customers to be treated. And so the course would always end with, well, if I was ultimately really, true to that, then I would let them just spend money. And I would say, okay, that's graduation. That's the moment of graduation from this class. And I would hand each of them a mission statement credit card, which my bank did not like at all because, having just clearly come bankrupt, and now at this point I've got 45 employees or something, and I'm going to hand them all a card that has a $500 credit limit on it and say, look, you just make a decision consistent with the mission of this organization and my goals, and you will never get to be no paperwork. You use this credit card, you spend the money, and then you explain to me what you did with it, and I will go and pay the credit card off, and you'll have another $500 in your pocket tomorrow to make another decision if you have to. And so it was quite an interesting approach. Again, the bank didn't like it because I was burning up credit that I didn't have because they counted that as credit. But aside from that, though, it produced a whole series of really cool stories about, and not even sometimes how the card was used. And I'll give a very, very quick example.
Yeah.
We had a tech working we were very technically oriented. We weren't retail. We were servicing the corporate environment. And so I had a technician working on a Saturday or a Sunday in our office just catching up and doing some work by himself. And there's a knock on the door, and there's a customer of ours, a big customer of ours. And this guy desperately needs an inkjet cartridge because that was the only way you could print color in those days, going back a bit. So he needed a color cartridge for his printer. And the story was he was about to get on a plane to Indonesia to make a very important corporate presentation. And he had to arrive with this thing because he couldn't count on being able to print anything over there. So he needed this thing to be printed up and done. So the technician, recognizing the client, recognizing the severity, the urgency of the situation, broke the lock off the little cupboard door that held all the cartridges. So when I came in the office on Monday, I've got this lock, torn out of the door on just a little hasp, like a little luggage lock. It wasn't like a high secure. But here's this broken lock sitting on my desk with a note saying, come and talk to me. So he explained the story, and I thought, wow, what a awesome, way to recognize that the message was getting through, that person felt, empowered enough to break a lock, physically do damage, give a guy a cartridge, and he was a $50 cartridge. It wasn't the end of the world at any stretch. But the act of doing it and saying, right, because he would have been very easy to say, well, I got to phone Doug and find him and see if he can come and open it. Or he would have been easy to say, hey, I'm just here by myself, sorry, I can't help you. But he didn't. And so that's, one of the things that I think evolved from that kind of process. So that was my business experience. And then I sold it and I moved on. And then I ended up getting into government. I really didn't want to. But I got convinced to come and be a technology evangelist for a program. So that got me into the city hall at the time of the city of Sudbury.
Yep.
And then that led to amalgamation and all the rest. And I was leading a team to figure out how we were going to amalgamate from the region and the 7 municipalities into one. So I was on the front leading edge of that. And then I was offered, I was suggested I should apply for one of the senior positions. And it's like, oh no, I just wanted this project. I really didn't want to. Anyway, I guess it's easy to see now that I did end up going for that role. And I was successful in being one of the first senior managers. So I was a general manager, according to the CEO, at the newly created city of Greater Sudbury. Yeah. And what I tried to do in that role was to bring some of that philosophy that I had as a business owner to government. Now, it was a bit ironic because one of the last things I did as a non-bureaucrat or a non-public servant was I happened to be the president of the local chamber of commerce from my business deals. And one of the last things I did was I went to council to a budget input session, and I was hammering on the you're going to need to run this place like a business. You need to be more accountable. You need to do business like things, not all this city hall stuff that you do.
Yeah.
So fast forward, a whole 12 months, and now I'm in there. I'm part
Yeah.
of, the organization that I was preaching about. So I learned very quickly that I couldn't run it like a business.
Right.
But I also learned that I thought that the fact that we couldn't run it like a business was an excuse to not do anything like a business, as opposed to taking the things you could from a business philosophy. And so that's where we met, Brady. Well, I was now probably, I'd been through the process of a general manager, and I'd moved on and been promoted to the CAO.
Yes.
And so that was the first opportunity I had to actually, at an organizational level, see if I could experiment with this and see if I could bring some of those business philosophies to a government organization. And so someone had seen the work of Juice and was quite impressed at a conference. And so I reached out, and that's how we ended up meeting. And at the time, I talked about trying to figure out how we could run more like a business,
Yeah.
even though we were a public organization. And so that's how I started on the journey, particularly with Juice, but more roundly as a CAO in an organization.
Yeah.
So I was CEO of Sudbury for 6 years in total. The last couple of years were a little tumultuous. Again, everything in my timeline is a long story, so I won't get into the details. But let's just say over the last couple of years, we had an auditor general who was trying to tear the organization apart. Without any basis, without any fact, so it was a unfortunate situation. And at the end of the day, that auditor general became a mayor. And so as I was CEO at the time, and I just, done battle with the guy for basically a whole 4 years. And so it wasn't long before we decided that it wasn't the best interest of either of us that I stick around. So I left the city of Greater Sudbury, and I quite honestly at the time thought, yeah, I'm probably done with the CEO thing. I think I've got all I could learn from that experience.
How bad?
I felt that those last 3 years in particular were like dog years. Every 1 year was worth 7 of real CEO experience. So
Yeah.
so I didn't think I would actually end up back in the CEO role, but I still had some energy and some passion to give to something, and I wasn't sure what it was. And long story short, I ended up through a connection being courted to think about Aurora. It was a great time in our family's life that we could maybe go down to Toronto, to the big city, not quite in Toronto, but the north end of Toronto. And I was intrigued by the opportunity here in Aurora, much smaller, lower tier organization. So, at first I thought, well, this would be a cakewalk. I mean, I was leading an organization of 3,500 people for 6 years, and part of that organization for 16 years. 350 employees, like lower tier. I only even have half the responsibility. So this will be basically a good place to be to go see Maple Leaf games because, my days will be so.
Yeah.
It wasn't long into that journey, though, that as you alluded to, that I realized that not only was it very different, but there was a unique challenge here in Aurora. And so for the second time with some sort of urgency or exploring, I reached out to you, Brady, and said, okay, I've just inherited this little assignment over here in Aurora. It's a much smaller organization. It should be easy. But I said, I'm used to having a lot of support as a CAO in a big organization. And at the time, I felt I was not only the CAO, but I was the director of operations, the director of facilities, the director of community services, the director of finance. I mean, I just felt like I had no strength of leadership around, and that I was going to be, tasked with leading and directing the entire organization.
Yeah.
And so the term that we had here at Aurora was the executive leadership team. And so I reached out and said, Brady, I've got this executive leadership team, and there's just no L. They're executives. They all see themselves executives because they're at the top of the food chain, and they're a team, sort of loosely defined. I mean, we all sit there one agenda. But other than that, there's really very little here of substance. And really, when you look at it, the whole organization needed to be pulled up, but it had to start with the ELT.
Yeah.
And part of that motivation was selfish because I didn't want to be the director of all those things. I wanted to get something that resembled the leadership role that I had, where I could be engaged with the whole organization and look at bigger objectives for the organization as opposed to the constantly embroiled in the day-to-day. And so that's the journey we've been on for the last 10 years here at the Town of Aurora, is to grow the organization. The other thing I'll say about the Aurora experience was that Aurora was one of those communities around Toronto that grew very quickly in the 2010 era. Massive green fields that were, just fields of new homes and things. And the organization had done very well to respond to the population growth.
Yeah.
The councils of the day had given people resources and equipment resources, and so the service levels were very high. It wasn't like we had this disaster of a town that was sitting back in history. But corporately, administratively, leadership-wise,
Yeah.
we were so small town, and yet we had become a large town over the previous 6 or 7 years. And so that was another gap that was just sort of a hole. Never mind the leadership gap and what those people were doing, but as an organization, we had to, quickly get ourselves out of small town into large town mode. Also, the municipal environment had changed immensely during those same years too, in terms of ombudsmen and social media and all the things that changed, forced change on municipalities. And somehow Aurora had been, managed to be oblivious to all of that change. And so there were some big gaps that we had to figure out how to, gain a lot of territory on quickly. So to go to the root of the question in terms of what drove me then, and rather than rather away and say, oh my God, this is not what I bargained for. I wanted to be like sort of king of a castle, CAO, bit of a royalty. There were a few things about the assignment that were very consistent with what I like to do, and one is
Yep.
leading an organizations that grow and innovate. I mean, we had to grow, we had to innovate, not
Yep.
from the same perspective as a technology business that's forced into it as a function of the market. We needed to catch up. We needed to grow and innovate at a little more urgent pace to reflect
Yeah.
the reality of the times that we were in. I had a technology background, so I like to leverage technology. I like to
Yeah.
be just short of the bleeding edge. I know the
Right.
bleeding edge hurts. I used to sell to the bleeding edge, but I wanted to be right on that edge, just after the bleeding edge, and very concretely on leading edge. So, what better opportunity to use that energy that I have, or that passion that I have for using technology, to help us accelerate through the growth and innovation that we needed to have as an organization. I've also always enjoyed, whether it was at the community level or in my business or now in the public sector, solving complex problems. I've always enjoyed the troubleshooting, the process of breaking down a large problem into a series of smaller problems. And there was no shortage of large problems here. So some of them were tactical in terms of processes and just things we need to do. And I also enjoyed those political ones that are, all right, there's a whole other level of here that we have to filter into what is, mostly a tactical problem, but there's some political things that we have to manage too. So all of these things were kind of true to my core. And so I embraced it rather than run from the idea that maybe I wasn't the ideal person to look after this small town of Aurora. And so when I came here for 3 to 5 years, and it'll be 10 years in January, and it's because there's been lots to do. It's because I've had a council that's been very supportive. We've done some really neat things, and it's been a great environment to operate in. So I've been able to continue to do those things, to problem solve, to grow and innovate, to explore technology, and at the core of it is community building. And even in my business days, I was very involved in the community in terms of leadership roles on boards and things, hospitals and hospital foundations and those kinds of things. So there's another, direct hit in terms of the things we've been doing for 10 years are all about community building. So I think that sums up the whole, I don't know, what is that, 27-year history, I guess.
Unbelievable. Yeah. So let's just roll back the calendar to that point where you've got a small town that's grown into a bigger town, but in terms of the sophistication required, in terms of processes and systems and technology, not there. And you've got an ELT that literally is functioning at least one level down from where they needed to be, but most often it was sometimes 2 levels down.
Correct. Absolutely.
So in the weeds that your leadership team meetings, there was like not an ounce of strategy to it. It was all tactical. And so you rolled up your sleeves. We began to work together, and we really started looking at, could we be a little bit more of an integrative leadership team, i.e., I'm not at this table to protect my function and to fight for scraps, but I'm here to figure out how do we lead the organization together rather than try to defend my own turf. And what that was a painful but meaningful journey. And one of the things I want to point to, Doug, is that we've had quite a change at at that table, and I would say that both council and people in the organization basically unanimously are just saying this is an incredibly impactful and very effective leadership team. So there was a changing of the guard. That didn't happen by itself. You had to step into several really difficult conversations with people who had been around a long time, had their own kind of following sometimes. Could you talk about that journey of difficult conversation to difficult conversation to difficult conversation? And would you say that you would do that if you had to do it again? Would you do it, make those decisions more quickly? Would you make them more slowly? Talk about the cadence of those decisions.
Yeah, and it's something that I still reflect on even now, going backwards. But at the time, I was always kind of like, oh, is this the time? Is it now the time? Do I pull a trigger here, or do I, relax and try to manage over time or make progress over time? The challenge that I felt I had was that as I came to the municipality, there was an existing executive leadership team that most of them had been here for quite a few years.
Yeah.
There was no identified chaos. I wasn't hired to clean up a mess. In the views of council, I was here to take over the seat and to help us go to the next. The assessment that I gave earlier was my assessment coming from a larger place and recognizing that there was much bigger gaps. But the community and the politicians wouldn't have seen that or didn't see it and didn't think of that was a pressing problem. In business terms, with a war chest of money and to be able to do things you do as an independent business decision maker, maybe accountable to a board of directors, maybe not if you're self-employed. There's some days I thought I would have fired the whole group and replaced them all with people that were leaders, right?
Sure.
But it really wasn't an option. I'm this guy from Sudbury coming down to Toronto to a community I don't know a soul. I didn't know one person with the address of Aurora. I had a brother in Newmarket, so I knew Newmarket was north of here. That was and so I felt a little vulnerable in that I needed the expertise and the experience of the people around that table. I couldn't just be frustrated and start, firing people and putting my people in place. So I wanted to create an environment where people could at least try to grow with us. Mm-hmm. And to innovate with us and to recognize that we needed to be in a different place as a leadership team. And if I look back at the last 10 years, I was very fortunate that I was able to make decisions only when that roadblock ultimately came. There was some growth, and then there'd be a period where, okay, this person has now become a roadblock in the development of the bigger team. And so, for the most part, those people over time had to be replaced when they became a bigger barrier.
Yeah.
To your question about sooner, there are some, in hindsight, I absolutely should have done sooner with the benefit of the experience now and looking backwards.
Sure.
Because, and it's a selfish assessment, but what I would say in my own defense, if I was put on the defense stand as to why I didn't do something sooner to fix that problem, be it an individual or, was always second to a bigger problem that I had or a bigger challenge that I felt. And if I lopped that part of the organization off, now I had two problems to deal with because now I had to replace that and bring someone in and get them up to speed. And so again, I know it's a little weak and a little selfish, but it was always, no, I'm going to put up with that a little longer because there's these other things that I think are more important. And this person is still giving the organization and myself enough utility that it's worth sticking it through.
Yes.
What that position failed to recognize, though, in hindsight, is the impact that some of those people had on the progress of the whole organization to mature and to grow and to innovate. And I had a bit of a blinder on sitting in the CEO's office, not being more perceptive about that and picking up on those impacts, because now with the team we have, to your point, in terms of what we now have in terms of a very strong executive leadership team in place, seeing the power of that and having with those all those barriers gone, he kind of thinks maybe this didn't have to be an 8 year journey. It probably could have been a 5 or 6 year journey if I had made some, decisions sooner. But it's hard. It's always easier to look back and say, yeah, if I'd done that, it would have been faster. But I still kind of lean a little back into the past and say, no, at the time, that person, for their faults or for whatever they offered us in terms of a little bit of this bump in the road in terms of progress, we were still progressing, and we were okay. So
I agree. And what I think people would say as they look at the entire journey, those who have been around for a long time, they would number one say that it was a very patient approach, and that by the time you made the call, there was such huge goodwill around. That was the right thing to do. Maybe it should have happened a while ago, but there were no people saying, "Oh no, this was abrupt. This was kind of flying off the handle." None of that, because of the patient approach. And I think the other thing was you were willing to, when there was a shortfall in leadership, you were willing to be the organ in the body that filtered the toxins out, and there was a cost to that. But I think you still had enough juice and enough fuel in you to be able to step in and come alongside someone where the organization didn't pay as much of a price as it could have had you not been willing to step in and shore that up. Is that true?
yeah, yes, I'd say that's fair. Some of the moves that I made them when I felt I had enough capacity to step in and play an interim role so I could get a better handle on what it is I even needed in that role. So there was one example, for example, where I let one of the directors go. We just weren't we just weren't on the same plane in terms of our thinking about the organization and about the people in the organization, and yet I still didn't have a good handle even on what the real challenges were in that part of the organization. And so in that case, I waited until I was comfortable enough with my workload
Yeah.
that when I let that person go, I became the acting director of that area and took it on in addition to my CO role because I needed, I'm a bit of a fan of I call it the selective Coveyisms. But one of the big things that I anchor on constantly is, you know, before you're going to talk about something, before you're going to preach about something, learn it as if you could teach it, right? So if I'm going to tell people what I think it needs to be as successful any one of my departments, I really want to understand firsthand, strong enough that it isn't just a list of objectives, but I also see some of the things that are in the way and understand exactly what's going on. And so in that particular area of the business, it was a larger part of the business. It was a very front line. It was the operations side.
Right.
Very close connection to with the residents,
Oh
very,
yeah.
very responsive to the political, you don't plow the road or you don't pick up the garbage, whatever, like, the politicians are over you. And I really didn't have a good handle within that little microcosm of the bigger organization, what the challenges were in there. What did it mean to go from small town operations to large town operations? I had never done operations. That wasn't my history of,
Right.
and I never had to do it in Sudbury because I was a true CAO in Sudbury and I had operations. I had a CAO of operations, if you will.
Yep.
And so I needed to get that knowledge. And so I did sit in that role for 6 or 8 months and, was the functioning director of that area. And then when I had a good handle on it, then I posted the job and made a few structural changes, nothing major though, but it realigned some things to get a better alignment, and then went to the market with a better understanding of what I needed to have in the person that would be eventually the leader of that area of the business.
One of the things that I've seen, and I'd love you to comment on this, but in Sudbury, you were famous for being out and chatting with, and I'm going to say the guys. I know that's a sexist, but at that point it was the guys on the road
Yeah.
crews and whatnot. And that level of, I'm leading at very strategic, but I have my eyes on and my hand on the pulse of what's happening at a very granular level. I find leaders are either here or here, and seldom is there an integration of knowing what's going on, as in the interface between the employees and the constituents, customers, etc., and being able to lead up here. So, and I think that that's partly what happened when you stepped into that ops role and had to get your hands wrapped around, okay, well, what exactly is this? And I need to understand it as if I could teach it. Could you just talk about those two levels, Doug, and how they differ?
Yeah. So, it's one of the biggest things that I was not happy about when it came to Aurora, because as the CEO of Sudbury, with a large, complex organization and very strong leaders throughout the organization, not just at the direct leadership table, but even below them. I mean, there's some big chunks of business in an organization of 3,500 people, and so I call it the luxury. I had the luxury of being able to be a leader at the top level, the executive level, be the interface between the politicians and the rest of the organization, but also the flexibility to say, no, I'm going to carve out some time so that I don't lose sight of the people at the front line. Because in an organization that size, not only the number of people, but the physical, the geography of the city was
Oh,
such that,
yeah.
I mean, to give you a sense of it, one of the things I instituted as a CEO was a Christmas tour where we went to every location in the city of Greater Sudbury that had 3 or more employees at it.
Oh, my goodness.
It took us 2 days to go and to travel to go, and that was just to drop in with a box of Timbits and a coffee and Merry Christmas, and then on the bus to the next. So an organization that spread out and that large,
Just 1
I,
second.
yeah,
When you say we, that's you and your executive team on the road.
being the
Yeah.
executive team, yeah, we drove, and the head of the union. I invited the head of the union to come with us. So that was it. The executive leadership team and the heads of there was 2 unions actually,
Yeah.
inside outside unit. So 2 union people, and we would go and just say Merry Christmas to everybody. That's all. And that took 2 days, of like 8 to 4:30.
Yeah.
Actually, it was later than that because we took advantage of the shift work and we went to 7 so that we could carry the beginnings of some night shift people. So in that environment, I wanted to be able to do something else beyond a Christmas cup of coffee. And so it started off as a bit of a joke. In the summer, one of my first summers as CEO, I said, hey, you guys know that CEOs don't do much. As in the first place, we sit up here, in the ivory tower, and we don't do a whole bunch. But it's even quieter in the summer. Like I got some spare time, and you guys all have holidays. I'd love to come out and help you. If you're short staffed on a road crew or something, let me come out. So it started as a bit of a tongue in cheek kind of thing. And anyway, it became quite an interesting thing. I had the experience of spending a day rebuilding a fire hydrant where I had a guy come and berate us, try to get some free parts off of us, and then when we wouldn't give them to us, and and I'm not CAO guy. I'm in the coveralls. Nobody knows who the hell I am. It's kind of like that boss, hidden boss thing, but not really. I'm working with one of my employees. They know who I am, but the
Yeah.
public doesn't know.
Yeah.
So I rebuilt water hydrants. I did a 12-hour shift with emergency services.
So you're doing backhoe work or
I
something.
trained. I did. I almost got into a sewer to flush a sewer main, and then they realized I hadn't had confined space training, so they wouldn't let me go in there because I
Yeah.
wasn't properly trained. But yes, that frontline experience was so valuable to me. I mean, the stories that I heard, just sort of anecdotal and yet very important about what, the frontline faces. I had a guy yell at me. I was literally on a tamper at 3 a.m. doing pothole thing downtown Sudbury. And I had a guy from an apartment balcony yelling at us saying he was going to get his 22 out and shoot us because we were making noise at 5 a.m. and disturbing his sleep. So to experience those things firsthand
Yes.
we're so valuable, and not that you went out and fixed any one of those things, but to give you a sense of what those people in the front line were facing. And so I got some insight on the tools they had, if they were inadequate. I got insight of how the public was reacting to them. I got insight I got some insight from developers that, on one hand would be very nice to me and would say things about what they were doing out in the development world. But then when I was in the field, I'd see a very different story, how they treated some of our employees.
Right.
So I was a little disappointed when I came to Aurora because I didn't have that same flexibility. I was, when I
No.
started, I was the CEO and the director and the whatever. Now it's a much smaller organization, so I think I've been able to do some of that, and it's not as diverse an organization, so there's only so many things I can do. But yeah, that frontline collection was very important, and it, I link it back to my entrepreneurial days where I wanted the frontline people to understand me a bit and to understand what I was thinking, what I was trying to do for the organization. And it gave me an opportunity to demonstrate that in real time. So I went to one of my 24-hour shift for Emerge. I was sitting in a room at 4 in the morning watching TV, and they had this old cathode ray CRT ray tube TV in there, for God's sakes, with no flicker. And I was irritated because I had to get up to change the channel at 4 in the morning. So I sent a flat panel 30-inch LCD TV over. Little things that don't, in a way don't mean anything, and yet, okay, that's crazy that these guys that work 24 hours, are dealing with this kind of stuff. But just get them friggin' TV and put it in there. So yeah, lots of neat experiences through that, I think it did help me it helped me with everything from budget to even my own team dynamics when I understood what the front line was facing in those situations.
Absolutely. Well, it's an entree into what I want to talk about next, because you said you had a penchant for technology and figuring out how you could solve complex problems and breaking them down into smaller problems. And it leads us to one of the things that you were not going to relent on, and that was syncing up and integrating some things that I think in a lot of municipalities are not synced up and integrated. So there's the corporate or the strategic plan from council and the mayor, and then there's the corporate plan of the business plan of how you run things in your shop, and there's the budget sequencing and how misaligned those things can be. And one of the things that you were really interested in is, could we have some sort of integrated business planning process? And there's quite a story there, because what you have now, and this is a bit of a spoiler alert for people who are listening, but we talk to organizations about what the Town of Aurora has in their IBPP, integrated business planning process, and I'm telling you, people are salivating over. If council member gets really hot to trot about, we want to do this project, you can literally look at a dashboard that says what are the resources and the different functions, how much financial resources are committed already, when are projects maturing, and you can see that. It is a beautiful piece of work. So could you talk a little bit about that and how it came to be and where it sits now?
Sure. So if you allow me, I'm going to take a little bit even of a step back because I think it leads
Yeah.
into that, which is, you did all the work with our ELT, and we got to a point of boastiness of an ELT that we were starting to, we still
Right.
had some warts and some things,
Yeah.
but we were starting to feel a little better. The oxygen poker game was a little better. We were feeling a little better about where the organization was going, and so we decided that we need to take this to our what we call our corporate management team. So these are all the people that
Yeah.
report to us.
Right.
So we went in with a very nice, some PowerPoints and
Oh
some,
yeah.
some good work we were going to do to show them the wonders of what we had achieved as an ELT, to show them we were on the right path.
Yeah.
And you were there for that exercise.
Yeah.
We went into the room. This was a team that did get together on a regular occasion, but again, true to the nature of the organization as it was like show and tell. We brought them in, we gave them a safety talk, we gave them a bunch of facts about the stuff that was going on, and then we, gave them a sandwich and sent them on their way. There was no management, there was no leadership, we weren't asking anything of them. It was a one-way dialogue of us reporting to them. And so, like everything else, I want to bring that level up as well. So this was the first steps into that. We brought all these 25 people into a room
Yeah. Yeah.
and
25,
said,
maybe even 30. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It was no more than 30 for sure. And we brought them into the room and said, oh, here's all the wonderful work we've been doing with Brady and Juice, and here's where we are. And, to paraphrase the output of that, they went, yeah, nice plan, but you got much bigger problems to deal with before we can even get our heads around it. They told us that. So it was quite a moment for us as a leadership
Oh
team.
yeah.
In fact, we had to regroup with the work we were doing because it sent us on a different path altogether.
It
So
did.
I give you that little piece because then, what basically happened was we embraced that. We did sessions with them. We listened to them. What are all the problems they saw? And they saw the same problems that I saw: silos, lack of communication across the organization, no sense of teamwork
Yes.
across the organization. All the things that, in some ways, are typical of larger organizations, but that we took it to a new level. Like we were pretty dysfunctional at
Oh
that level as
yeah.
well.
Oh yeah.
So we worked on that, but one of the pieces of glue that helped us to cement the role of that group and to really make them feel that we were asking for more than just feedback from them in terms of how good or bad we were doing as an ELT, was we started down this path of deciding, they should be the ones to help us decide our capital plan. Every
Yep.
year, and to go back to your part, Brady, the strategic plan drives the business plan, the budget gives us the resources. So inevitably, the budget tells us what projects we're going to do because we get the funding to go and pave that road or to fix that building or to do whatever. And so those things were like throwing darts,
Yep.
at a board. We'd say, in fact, the philosophy of the executive leadership team before I got here was put 50 things on the board and let council choose the 30 that are best funded. So it became without calling it that, it became an internal competition.
Oh yeah.
The individual players around the ELT table were trying to get their departmental needs met. There was no sense of a corporate need. It was like, well, we should try and get as much can, whether it's new hires or a new piece of equipment or it's a project. And so it was very much a competition. And it was really driven by the ELT. Like basically the individual will go back and list their 20 things they want to do and then throw them in the pile. And then, the CEO with all his wisdom would try to give it some sense of an order without, really the knowledge, the frontline knowledge that I should have had.
Sure.
And we wanted to flip that around. And we said, we did recognize as an ELT that the people in the best position to know what the priorities of the organization should be are the CMT. They're closest to these actual projects. They're closest to the equipment failures. They're closest to the new demands that are being put on our services. They're the ones that should be helping us decide what gets done and how it gets done. And so we did have an exceptional resource. You mentioned Martin as a person that's here who's also got a real drive for technology and things. So he wants to technologize everything. And so that was very helpful. But the philosophy was basically, we want to hand this body of work to the corporate management team, and we don't want competition. We don't want to see what sticks with council. We want to tell council, you've got this much resource. This is where it should go. This is our advice as your leadership team as to what you should do. And as a executive leadership team, the only way we could do that and speak as one voice was A, if we got the information from the front line, and B, if we agreed to follow the information that the front line gave us, as opposed to bringing our biases from our departments in and saying, well, that's not fair. How come they get 2 new people and I only get, I get none?
Yeah.
So we developed a system, the integrated business planning process. And again, it's one piece of the journey. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Well, let me just interrupt for a second because
Yep.
there was a stage where the ELT was still not as much L as we wanted.
Yes.
And what happened in that process of trying to ram forward all the priorities and strategic plans, and they said, stop, the culture is not at a place where it can do this. So you've got to address some cultural issues. You took a big gulp and you stepped into that work. The ELT were still not completely engaging at the highest
Correct.
level that they needed to. And so what happened was this CMT, the managers, the 25 of them, they really stepped up.
Yes.
And in one sense, there was a mismatch in the level of what they were carrying vis-a-vis the ELT. And I think it really started to send a message to the ELT. It's like, okay, we are actually needing to elevate our game here because we've got a passionate group of people who are doing some amazing things. Is that a fair assessment?
Absolutely. No, that's a very good point that I missed. Yes, they actually, in the absence of the behaviors that we should have been doing as an ELT collectively and individually in some cases, quite frankly, they developed their own networks. By being assigned work that was valuable and actually had a role in moving the organization forward, it helped them cultivate new relationships that they never had. Again, to go back to my earlier comment, before we put them all in a room, showed them a bunch of slides, bought them lunch. I mean, there was no relationship building amongst those CMT members. They were just there as people who reported to ELT. That was their only bond. But through this work and through listening to them and giving them a higher purpose beyond their day-to-day, they started forging their own relationships and they modeled better behaviors than they were seeing in some cases from their directors. And they would comment to me. They would say, little things like, well, don't say anything, but, I've already gone directly over to my colleague in the other silo, it was a silo before, and, work something out. Because before, the path going up to my director and then that director over to the other director and then down, who needs that?
Yeah.
First of all, this director is a barrier sometimes, but even without the barrier, why would we bother the directors with that when it's something that we know we're on the right path to do? And so, yeah, that was a big plus for the organization, and it did put pressure on a couple of the laggards in the ELT that
Yeah.
maybe hadn't completely drunk the Kool-Aid yet. So.
Yeah. So back to IBPP, you were just about to describe that.
So we, Martin was very engaged in the process. He started off kind of as a custodian of the process for us. But when we started to narrow in on this prioritization of capital works and the integrated business planning process, he just embraced that, and he wanted to throw formulas at it, and he wanted to turn it into a statistical analysis, which was awesome. I mean, I can't take any credit for that vision. That was his.
Yeah.
But the essence of it was we need a system that allows us to, as a CMT, 25 people in a room, to sit down, talk about the projects that we see from our vantage point need to be done, rank them in some logical way, the urgency, the financial capability, the resource constraints that we have, non-financial resource constraints, and map this stuff out so that we agree to a ranking, if you will, of each of these projects, which should just drive a list that numerically says, we've only got 25 million in resources. There's where the 25 million line is, and then we can have a little bit of somber. Well, there's a couple there that are very close. Yeah, let's work those two. So there's a little bit of work on the margin, which was done in every case.
Yeah.
But what resulted was the list of the projects that the CMT gave to the ELT and said, this is what you should be putting in the budget binder when you go to council. Because we believe in this. We believe in the formulas. We've accepted that our project is going to be for another year because it doesn't fit right now with the priorities of the organization and the drivers and the rankings that we've assigned to these things. So they basically, with Martin's coordination and Martin's technical savvy, basically built that system with very little input from the ELT.
Yeah.
I mean, they brought stages up to us, showed what we were doing, but with rare exception, we went, keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
Like there was no. And so one of the offshoots of that, not directly related to the integrated business planning process, which was this, again, 25 inputs, 25 people giving inputs and developing a list, but where it spilled over into was the idea of a 3-year staffing plan, where we brought that same kind of logic. People resources are always the toughest to get. Everybody needs more people. And that was even worse than the capital project in terms of people putting their 20 positions that they wanted, knowing we're only going to get 5. Yeah. And we throw all 20 at council and say, you decide which are the 5 sexiest politically. Made no sense. We'd end up with stuff that only had revenue generating off it. We'd end up with political decisions, not operational decisions. And so we took the success of the integrated business planning process and said, look, 25 people got aligned and told us what our whole capital plan should look like. As an ELT, we should be able to do the same thing around staffing and present a 3-year staffing plan that we can all stand behind. And for the second year now, for the second term, we've had a 3-year staffing plan that has been approved in the second year of the council mandate for the following 3 years and has never been altered yet so far by council. There's one more budget coming up in the fall, so we'll see. Maybe I've just jinxed it now by saying it. But we've said in year 2 of their term, year 2, 3, year 3, and year 4, these are what your ELT says is the most pressing needs to add new people. And there's been a little bit of micro adjusting on some things where they didn't really want to get into that line of business or something, but otherwise they've agreed to a 2-year staffing plan, and it's just rolled every year. And it's, again, because there was no competition. People, the whole organization saw that relief is coming, but it's not coming for year 3. And they understood it. They understood the needs of the previous 2 years and why they fell to the 3rd year, but they also saw themselves in the 3rd year getting the relief. And so that gave them, the energy to keep going and say, okay, it's going to be, we're going to be a little short staffed for another couple of years, but then help is coming. And council has, followed through. So it's spun off into a way of thinking, not just a good process that had numerical things attached to it. And we had a little bit of a formula for some of the staffing in terms of some of the same criteria, ability and the urgency. Like if it's a health and safety thing, then obviously that rises to the top, things like that. But it was a lot more the staffing component was a lot more of the managers, the executive leadership team coming together and agreeing that this is the best path forward for
For
the
sure.
organization.
When I look at CAOs and those who do not want the dog to be wagged by the tail, and what I mean by that is you can have one or two rogue council members who have this passionate, they have an in with the mayor, and all of a sudden you are being wagged by something that has no strategic imperative whatsoever. So in order to avert that, you can either be a super schmoozer with every one of the council members and the mayor, or you can bring a ton of bluster and just be that hard ass. There's different ways that one can not be at the whim and the fancy of, or one can have a very robust system and say, you're demanding this, here's the dashboard. And when they look at the dashboard, you almost have to you'd have to be idiotic to say, yes, we will continue to drive this forward, because you look at the implications on the business and on the community and you go, okay, yeah, I don't have a leg to stand on here. So it feels to me that you've gone that direction. Does that feel true to you?
It does. It does. It absolutely is. It's got to be the foundation or the cornerstone of that representation of council. You've got to have that good data that at least to a reasonable politician has to be considered in the argument, right? I mean, some of them, there's always the unreasonable one that doesn't care what you throw at them. They've got their mindset on something, and that's an occupational hazard in this business that you run into those personalities. But I think, it's equally important though that while, especially specifically in my role, is to find that balance between and to really actually genuinely be an effective interface between the political side and the good work that we've been talking about in terms of the team's been doing, because it could also be very deflating to have that work dismissed if it was presented in a way that didn't get the support of council. Now you've taken a CMT, you've had them do all this stuff, they're starting to feel good about their impact, and then council says no, like we're not doing any of that stuff. So now you've just wasted their time, and you've taken out of their day. They're already very busy people. They already didn't think they had the time to do this kind of work because they were never asked to do this kind of work. So an important part of it in this kind of a system, a municipal or a government system, is to be also always checking the pulse of the political side and setting them up for what is about to come, so that you almost, or you rarely bring them something that they wouldn't approve, because you're balancing how it's presented, when it's presented, with the realities of the political side. I just think that's part of the role that is the unique part about a CEO role, when you're the interface between a political body and then this group of people that are getting all of the work done that the political body wants done. Is you got to try and protect the workers from sometimes the pettiness or the craziness or just the lack of knowledge of the political side, and you don't want that to wear on the attitudes and the sense of progress that they're making in spite of some of
Yeah.
those political decisions.
Yeah, to me that's very different than schmoozing. It is a core understanding of what matters most inside each of their world, and how you formulate, how you frame up your needs and the needs of the organization in a way that will appeal to their interests, and to do it in such a time that you're always building the bridge before you really need it.
Yeah, a lot of it is tactical on that side, right? You're approaching the people that you know are not going to want this, but you're not avoiding that. You're not treating them like they're never going to like this, so I'm never going to even talk to them about it. No, you embrace that. You go and you tell them the story, even though you know they're not going to like it. Mm-hmm. But then you bolster your success though by going to the others that already are kind of believers anyway, but then you give them even more information. Like this is why this one in particular makes so much sense. Never mind the formula and it's spit out from a CMT and all those good things. But here's the CAO's version of what I know about this situation, why this is, even though there's going to be a couple that aren't going to like it, here's why I really want you to give this, careful thought and maybe help me pitch it to your colleagues. Rather than me standing by myself at the front of the organization saying, no, this is the list and this is why you need to go with my list. Bring the whole organization to rally around some of the things that are important. And that goes back to some of this cubby stuff, like know it as enough to teach it, right? I can't get up and defend a budget or defend a hire if I don't completely understand why it really is needed. It can't be because it's it scored 82 out of 100. That can't be my only reason why that position is needed. I've got to have a reason in my mind that links to the political realities and the political thoughts of our masters so that it makes sense to them at the political level as well as to me to the numerical tactical level.
Yeah. Everything you're doing in terms of solving complex problems, breaking them down, bringing technology, bringing integrative leadership, it's all in service of one simple thing that you and your ELT and your CMT all decided, which is Aurora. We passionately believe that it can be, and we want it to be, a small town charm with large town sophistication. And it feels like, when I first started working with you at 2016 or whatever that was, it was a long time ago anyway.
Yep.
You had all the charm, but some of that charm was being marred by a lack of sophistication in terms of processes, technology, systems, people. Culture wasn't, what it needed to be as well. It feels like a very different place now. Do you think employees would say, yeah, we're getting closer to that small town charm, large town sophistication, and would constituents be saying those types of things? Maybe not in that type of language.
Yeah, I'm not sure the constituents would because, as I said, when I got here, the constituent, there's always the people that don't like government at any stretch, but I would say on the masses, the people in the community seem to appreciate the high service standard that CEOs and councils before me had risen to. The roads were plowed, the parks were meticulously maintained. Like the community has a very good look to it. It's always been resourced that way. So the community wouldn't necessarily see that change to, large town sophistication. The people that are more directly involved, the service club groups, the people that have a more direct relationship with the entire organization, with key people, they would probably see it.
Okay.
It's interesting. The employees though certainly do, and I can we'll know for sure in about a month's time. It's ironic actually. Today I had my initial start off interview for our Platinum Excellence Canada designation. We've submitted for that, and we're just right now in the review process. So the kickoff was with the mayor and I and Excellence Canada, so that's when I got here. They had just achieved bronze, I think about 4 years before, and then it sort of wallowed.
Right.
And so we've used it as a bit of a, in and of itself, it isn't a driver, but it is something that at least allows us to stop and pause and measure what we've achieved so far in the organization towards a more sophisticated, and also to understand what needs to be done to go to the next higher level, whether that's bronze to silver, silver to gold, and now gold to platinum. So we're very hopeful that we will achieve. There's a whole bunch of employee-based feedback groups that Excellence Canada will be meeting with over the next month, and they'll be asking the employee base directly, what have you seen in the organization? What's changed? What improvements are there? And there's some key areas where they want to make sure that we are truly a more sophisticated large town, and we're very optimistic that we think we're in a really good place. And so yeah, it's been a journey that we've been on, and I know the employees have seen it. I've had direct relationships or direct interactions, I should say, with employees who have, the ones that have been here through the whole 10 years and have, articulated what a changed environment they operate in now, and how much how much better it is to be here. And I mean, and the other thing that I would say would help support that is the last two hires onto the executive leadership team were internal candidates, who came here, who stayed here, who felt positive enough about the future that they wanted to grow with the organization. And this is the land of opportunity. We're in GTA. If you've got any, aspiration to do something bigger just for the sake of doing something bigger, there's lots of places to look. And yet, we've been able to put the last two people on our ELT from internal. So that's another good indication that we're on a good path.
It's a really good indicator. So I would guess that there'd be people who are hoping that you don't leave anytime soon. But I could also imagine that there could come a point somewhere in the next 5 to 10 years where you go, you know what, I've really done what I came to do here in Aurora. And so that legacy piece, I can imagine we asked what juices you, and you gave several really, really great answers. My guess is that what you leave behind could be part of what's juicing you right now. If that's true, what are some of the things? So for me, Doug, I look at my organization, and I've been, Juice is 22 years old. I'm 67, so yeah, I'm trying to figure out where is that off ramp. I don't feel like I have to find it anytime soon. But when everything's all said and done, what I hope and what I've dreamed about is that my employees would say, actually, those were some of the best years of my life. Those were some of the best years of my life. Now, that's a legacy play.
Yep.
So there's all sorts of other things. We want to make a difference in the world for all sorts of organizations. That's legacy as well. But that's one of the big ones for me. But yours might be quite different. But if you were to ask yourself, what is that thing that you hope to hear, and what does it have to do with the legacy that you're leaving behind? What might that be for you?
For me, I think we've achieved some of that in the sense that this big project, we did a big physical build here, Town Square project. Without getting into details of it, it's a physical asset, a building that we built that is definitely punching above our weight class as a community, our size, and it ended up being a perfect example of how the whole organization came together in a sophisticated way to support something bigger than we should have been able to take on, and we worked through, and we did it during COVID even, and so I mean it was just an all-encompassing. It was because of the size of our organization, a project of that magnitude, it had tentacles into the whole organization.
Oh yeah.
It was a $60 million project. The town had never done anything of that scale or size ever before.
Give us 30 seconds on what it is.
Sure. So we had an existing library, a 20-year-old library building right on Yonge Street. We had an old, separated by a two-tier parking lot, a two-level parking lot. We had a 130-year-old school that Diefenbaker went to, I believe, as a child. And then we had some old buildings, the old library, the old fire hall that had been underused for years. And the project involved getting rid of the parking lot, making a plaza, building onto the old school a brand new performance and cultural center, and attaching it in a way that respected the heritage of the building. It's a historical building. And then linking the new building to the library with a bridge so that it didn't interfere with the square. So, I mean, it was, depending on how you looked at it, it was we saw it as sort of 4 or 5 different projects, quite frankly. And we broke ground as COVID started. So, I mean, that's just another complication and so to summarize the journey and to look back in my role, for us to have got through that the way we did and to successfully open it, which we did in September of last year, sorry. Really, the organization that I came to would never have been able to pull that off. I can say that with certainty. But through the progress we've made, through the sophistication we've gained as an organization, through the risk management tools we've put in place to make sure that we're on track with things and that we've got a good handle on where things are going. As I said, we were able to build something that was definitely hitting above our weight class. as a small town. So I think that's a really good sign of progress made, and that something that has occurred under my watch.
Yeah.
I've been, it is a topic of conversation these days. I've one of the things that I've been lamenting on the last few months is that I've never done anything for 10 years through all of the various things. Even when I had a business for 9 years, I mean, we went from, like I said, 3 employees to 60 employees in 4 cities. So, I mean, yes, it was one job, but it wasn't. I mean, it was a whole series of jobs. And even with the city of Sudbury, I had, basically 5 year chunks of assignments that were very radically different, 3 of them. But I've been doing this for 10 years. And I'm a big believer that that organizations need new people in the kind of roles that I have. Not because I'm tired or have no energy to give to it, or I think it's just a good, healthy thing for an organization. So, I think it's probably time to start that conversation. I don't think it's any time like urgently or anything like that, but I am a strong believer in, it's someone else's turn to bring another bunch of passion, maybe a slightly different passion, maybe a slightly different direction, but not to throw out the past or to throw out the progress we've made, but to maybe fresh it up and bring a new perspective. So that's been I've experienced people that have stayed too long in
Yeah.
boards and community groups and so on because they love the work and they're passionate and they're good people. I mean, this is not about being you know long in the tooth or anything like that. It's just not good for the organization
Yep.
to be a large organization especially to have the same leadership base for a long time. I think it's good to bring in some new blood. So yeah, it'll be and plus, I don't know. I've been able to keep very energized and very engaged, but it's because of the progress we've made, the big project, COVID. I mean, there's been a bunch of things that have given me the energy and the passion to keep doing this basically the same job for 10 years.
Yeah.
And so so I'm quite fortunate that I've been able to be that engaged for that long length of time.
Yeah.
It's not my nature.
Well, if I'm a betting man, I would say that the person who replaces you once again could actually be coming up from the organization. I can see a person for sure on your ELT, and I won't make any predictions, but it wouldn't be surprising that we could have a person right there who's sitting at the table now who could be the CAO. We'll see. I wouldn't be stepping into making those kind of predictions loosely. So as you look at the days ahead, though, you're a grandpa. You've
I
got
am.
a beautiful property on Providence Bay in Manitoulin Island. I think you're more of a haw eater than some of we haw eaters are in terms of your passion and your love for the island. So there's lots of good things ahead.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Yes, I came to Aurora with no grandchildren, and it's a pretty safe bet that I'll leave with six because I think we're at six and holding. I'm not entirely certain, but anyway, I got six now, so
Six
lots
is
of
good.
fun.
6 is good.
Yep.
So I want to thank you, Doug, for investing your time here today. There's just so much in what you've talked about in your journey that other CAOs, but anybody in a municipal environment, any leader can learn from. So this is a really beautiful play, and I want to just say thank you for being with me today.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for what would it be now? 16 years of working with me and coaching me through some of these. It hasn't. I may have made it sound like a natural progression, and that I've been on top of what I'm doing, but I certainly haven't over the 16 years. And I thank you and Juice for the work that your contribution to the journey, because it's definitely been a significant part of our success as well. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much for saying that. All right. All the best to you, and hope our listeners enjoy this beautiful conversation with Doug Nadorozny.